Hey guys, Anthony from SCC and Intellispark again. Hope everyone's doing well. As you know, last week, Trisha and I discussed the power of building level interventions and how we can use those to better our students' lives at our school and do things for them. So today I kind of wanted to continue that conversation to keep things going in a positive way through the school year, and discussing how we can help build our relationships and look at the social emotional well-being of our students, which is very important right now with everything going on. It's not just about their grades or their academics. And that's a crucial thing to discuss. If they're not okay socially and emotionally, they're less likely to focus academically. So Trish and I are here to discuss and give you guys some more positive things and things to think about going forward through the year. So welcome back, Trisha.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Good to be here.
Good to have you. So to start, I was wondering, what do you think schools can do to build this solid foundation of well-being during this challenging time that we're facing?
Yeah, I mean, we know right now students are really struggling to engage. Disconnection from friends, from teammates, a lot of sports and other activities have been canceled. And just anyone beyond their family is spilling into their motivation and engagement on all fronts, and especially with their academic commitments. The key here is to try and rekindle those connections and motivations. And that is best done through establishing relationships with these kids who are really struggling to connect. How do we build a relationship? I mean, educators do this every day. It's part of what brought them into education. But often the focus on academic performance dominates the discussion and definitely adds a heaviness to it. And we know kids often want to walk away from what's heavy because there's a lot of that right now. So it's really important to try and carve out time to engage students on what matters to them most and recognize and praise them when they put forth any effort to re-engage. They need some positive feedback loops to break this spiral of frustration, and especially because many students are feeling pretty brittle and they may have lacked resilience even before the pandemic. So it's just all heightened, as we know. I mentioned in last week's discussion how right now our students are ripe for engagement because they've had some time to unplug and take stock of things over the December break. Counselors have so much on their plates, but if they have a subset of students that are really disengaging, these are the students to target for those one-on-one conversations about what does excite them, what is on their mind, and where they need help. One counselor with whom we partner talked about the impact of having information from the Intellispark surveys when he reached out to students that he was most concerned about. He sort of had his critical student list. A couple of days after he had used our Get to Know Me survey in Intellispark, this takes about 10 minutes for a student to complete on their mobile device or laptop or whatever device they have. He sat down to meet with a student, and he said the student just had his head in his hands. He wasn't looking at him. He was just really depressed. The counselor thanked him for completing the survey. So again, reinforcement of good action the student took. And he just started talking about what the student had shared in the survey. And he said the student just lifted his head from his hands, looked up, and then he just started to talk about, he started to engage on the things that he shared, what his frustrations were, what his concerns were, what his interests are. And this counselor said it turned into this great hour-long conversation. And he was just overjoyed at how the student opened up. You know that this student was right for this conversation and really needed to have this breakthrough. I think probably the counselor and the student together both needed to have this breakthrough. It doesn't end there. That's obviously just the beginning, but it's a critical step to give that student the hope and the confidence that someone cares and is taking time right now in the present in January 2021 to know them where they are in this moment. It's never too late in the school year to restart or rekindle that connection. This counselor shared that this happened with multiple other students that day and then later that week because he had this rich and current information in the students' words from this Get to Know Me survey.
Wow, that's awesome. That's such like a powerful example of how having that information and knowing what to talk to our students about can really help them open up and instantly feel like we're a trusted adult and they're connected to us. And even if we're just getting to know them mid-year, like you said, these things like this get to know me survey sound like a great way to get to know them right then and there if it's someone you haven't worked with as much or was just new to the district. So I was wondering now, how do counselors deal with the fact that we don't always have time to connect with all the students right away? How do we keep this positive momentum going if the year gets kind of crazy?
Yeah. So I'll start with the second part of your question first. Students do know that their counselors don't have time to connect with them like this every day. But it is these little bursts of encouragement and outreach that remind a student that there is someone else there who knows their story, who cares about them. So, even sending these students, especially the ones we know who are struggling, a quick text or an email every other day, maybe just once a week, just to say, hey, I hope you're doing well. Let me know if you need anything. It's an important start. It's an outreach. It's a reminder you're not alone. And in Intellispark, we also have a feature called a high five. The high five makes it really easy for anyone in the school who has an active account to send a quick message to commend a student on great attendance, great work on an assignment, great engagement in their online class, great support of other students. Any type of praise is appreciated, especially as it is so rare to come by these days. I mean, even for adults, it's so hard to come by that praise. Students definitely aren't hearing a lot of it. When I was a teacher, I was a high school English teacher and language teacher. I was always amazed at how excited my 16, 17-year-olds were to receive a sticker on their quizzes, their tests, their papers I returned. Especially now, these little bursts of encouragement and joy are those little carrots that we all need. We know that things at home are probably pretty tense between students and their parents. So receiving positive feedback from a caring adult is more important than ever. And this leads me back to the first part of your question, Anthony. We know that counselors, given their loads, aren't able to see the day-to-day classroom engagement or the lack of engagement and withdrawal of each of their students, which is why it is really ideal if these little bursts of encouragement could be coming from classroom teachers who do see the day-to-day baby steps and improvements. As an example, one of our counselor partners who's activated an Intellispark account for each of his school staff members has done so not only so that staff members have access to the rich information of the surveys, not only so they can, they have the ability to keep track of plans and supports that are in place for students, or the ability to make notes and share observations and actions, which they can all do in Intellispark. But they can also see which students are receiving high fives and which ones aren't, and why they are receiving them if they are, so they can either reinforce and build on it, or they can see which kids are receiving no positive feedback, probably need some engagement or encouragement, and can reach out and give a high five, that shows up in the kids' email, and helps them keep some positive momentum. A lot of this is, we all need positive momentum. And so these are some tools that certainly a counselor could use, but are so easy for other staff members to use. Heck, it could even be like this, the admin at the, who's in the office who says, hey, like they can give positive feedback to a student if they have an account, because they might be seeing a student reach out to the school. So it's a great way to empower the school community broadly.
Awesome. Thank you once again for, as always, your awesome examples and sharing those stories and how these strategies that counselors can use and educators can use for their students and to build those relationships, and how a lot of it is right there in Intellispark for them. So once again, I don't want to take any more of your time for this week. So thank you for joining us, Tricia. And to everyone watching, I will post the Intellispark info below this video, and come back next week and watch our last video about this. So thanks again for joining us, everyone. And thank you, Tricia, for your time today.
My pleasure. Have a great one, Anthony. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much, Anthony. It's really good to be here talking to you, especially hoping we can really help our school partners to have a great next half of the school year. It's important to keep in mind that our students are counting on us to meet them where they are and to help them get through what, even in a normal year, would be the midwinter doldrums. Mid-year is always kind of a tough time to work through. They're anxious about experiencing more of the same in the second half of the school year, especially if they were struggling coming into the break. And, just like us educators, they have had some time to think and reflect over the holiday break too about how they're really doing. So it's the ideal time to check in with them while they still might feeling just a little bit energized and maybe hopeful about the potential for a fresh start in the new year. It's a good time to just ask them how they're doing, if they've had ideas for how staff can help them make some positive changes or improvements in the second half of the year. Students are really craving this kind of engagement right now, especially the opportunity to use their own voice during what is an incredibly isolating time, certainly for all of us, but especially for this very sensitive age group. Some schools with whom we are partnering are asking students to complete a quick survey to assess how the students are feeling on a number of dimensions. And then they're putting plans in place to try and move the needle for kids, responding to what they're hearing from them and trying to make a difference for them in the second half of the school year.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I think it's great that schools are taking more time to hear from their students in their communities, because that's how we build those relationships and get it kind of like we get to read the room and see how everyone's doing. So I think that's awesome. How are the schools that are doing this implementing the surveys? Do they feel that they're going to be able to do it in a timely fashion so that they can effectively make change within the school year? What tips do you have for making this goal more achievable?
Yeah, that's a really important point, because this could easily feel like an incredibly daunting task on top of everything else that they're doing. But the reality, and especially for counselors, is that this is the kind of effort that's at the heart of their work right now. So our hope is with a little bit of structure and focus, we can help them achieve it to a great effect. And so we're seeing schools respond in two different ways to the information that they're collecting. First, where they see specific students struggling deeply, they're making a point to engage those students right away, both to ensure those students know that they are cared for, kind of most critically, and then to take immediate actions on the most critical issues. So those could be issues of well-being related to food or shelter. Perhaps it's social emotional needs or specific academic needs or technical needs around even just getting online. Immediately connecting students with resources gives them hope and stems this negative momentum and the sense of a downward spiral. And many need that lifeline now more than ever. But then where schools are seeing more systemic changes across a wide array of students, maybe broader challenges of self-management, lack of persistence in response to disappointment or failure, or very likely what a lot of schools are seeing is just low engagement across the broader population of students. They're exploring a handful of global programmatic strategies that can be embraced across the school. Certainly, those global interventions need to be very targeted, very few, very focused in order to be impactful and to drive a measurable change. But we know that consistency across the school, across the classrooms, and just a few impactful strategies will give focus to staff and is more likely to be felt across the student body. My heart just sank this week when one of our school partners shared that many students in her school are reporting that the most challenging thing about distance learning is that their teachers have stopped smiling. If smiles, it brings tears to my eyes, think about it. But if smiles and laughter and fun are part of our daily interaction with our students, it will have a positive ripple effect by conveying that things just aren't as bad as they seem. And this is what will keep students coming back to our classes online or in person. Just think of how the tone of a student's day would change if every educator would open their class by greeting them with a smile and ideally telling them how happy they are just to see them. Just focusing on these welcoming routines in every classroom to increase hope, optimism, and happiness across the school could be huge. So let's help our students focus on simple, positive things like knowing people care about them and that things are going to be okay. These are small but impactful actions that could have great effect if taken effectively across the school community. I will just add that some of these same schools to which I'm referring do plan to redeploy the same surveys again in the spring to see if they've been able to move the needle on the feedback they're receiving from students mid-year. Hopefully, they'll see great return on these efforts. But one way or another, they're going to learn a lot about what it takes to support their students. And without doubt, students will become more optimistic, knowing that their teachers are taking time to hear them and embracing new approaches that might make a difference in their day-to-day experiencing. It's a quiet way for educators to model a responsive learning environment.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think you made a lot of really good points there, and it's so sad to hear that example about that student. That's definitely more common than we like right now with everything. So I was just wondering though, my role, I feel like, I'm sure a lot of counselors watching this are like, yep, my role is always changing, sometimes day to day even, with everything going on right now. I was just wondering, what do you think would be the best way to efficiently deploy these surveys and collect results and figure out a plan of action mid-year? You know, like what approach specifically do you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that this could be a lot to deploy if there isn't already a process in place. But in Intellispark, we are able to bring partners on board 1 week. And if they're comfortable with the surveys which we have, they're able to push out the surveys on one day and then read the responses from students and even start to see trends across, selected groups. They can slice and dice as soon as they've been completed, sometimes even in the same day. So it feeds right back into our platform. Some schools start by surveying a small group just to get a feel for the process. And then they move on to the whole grade, the whole school, sometimes multiple schools in the district, particularly middle school and high school students. We offer 4 different surveys that students can complete in about 10 minutes each on any mobile device or computer. The surveys are intended to provide quick indicators of how a student is doing on a range of dimensions, including social and emotional well-being, their sense of connection, engagement, and belonging to the school community, the quality and helpfulness of their peer and adult relationships. And then we have one called the Get to Know Me survey, which helps students get to know a student's perceived strengths, passions, interests, current needs, and even what types of classroom strategies they have found most helpful, which is fantastic because if we know what's working in one class from what a student has to say, other teachers can see that and leverage that in their own classes and maybe try it out. It might work for other students as well who have similar learning styles. These surveys can either reaffirm the concerns that the team already has about certain students, and maybe they're already taking action on it. So it can be very reaffirming, but it can also identify students that may not have been on their radar. Things are changing all the time for students and could be very different now than they were in September. Our hope is that, especially for those students who are struggling right now, we're giving tools to schools that'll help them bring focus to their efforts, so at least a few things can improve for students by the springtime.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I think that was a great strategy there for everybody. I think that's awesome. It's crazy that all that's right there on Intellispark for them to do. I think that's awesome. So we're out of time for today. I don't want to take up any more of your time, but I wanted to say thank you for joining us and sharing that. It was very insightful. I hope everyone watching got as much out of it as I did. And just a reminder, we'll be back next week with more about this. And in the meantime, I'll post it below. Intellispark's info will be right below. Go click on it and go check it out. Thank you again for your time, Patricia, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Anthony. My pleasure.
Bye-bye.